My story today begins with a gun. Having grown up in Wisconsin, but of course many of you already knew that, my friends are hunters, and they tended to see animals as a resource that belonged to mankind versus the earth. I recall a very vivid encounter with Iqbal Mian, my father, who was a villager and a farmer raised in Bangladesh. And he gave me his insight into his reverence for nature when he discovered that I had taken aim at a sparrow with a rifle for sport. His heartbroken face conveyed more than disappointment. My father had explained that I had violated that bird's right to flight had I injured it or killed it. He stated that the bird offered more to me than I did to it. A song, a sight of beauty, and even food for survival if it came down to it. And so a spiritual connection was born that day. I could never take a look at a bird as another target, and I felt joined at their presence. Suddenly, the skies felt populated. My consciousness for creatures of flight transformed. About 10 years ago, my father's words of wisdom became much more internalized when I got to visit his native land of Bangladesh. During the descent in the plane, I paid attention to the luscious landscape through the onboard cameras on the Boeing 777. It's kind of funny, when you go to a new place, there's an aura of excitement. It's as if your body recognizes the event in an internal GPS. And so in very little time, my senses heightened, and it took very little time to process the new sounds, the scent of the dusty air, and the sights of malnourished crowds that were stricken by poverty. As I passed all of these souls that were suffering from environmental and economic conditions, I started getting really guilty, because where I grew up in Wisconsin, it's a paradise in comparison to Bangladesh. Now, just to give you a reference, the only two things that Bangladesh and Wisconsin share in similarity is that their land mass is about the same. Bangladesh has half of the United States population. It's 20 feet below sea level. It can face Hurricane Katrina-like conditions during its monsoon season. 40% of the population has asthma, and 50% of the population has arsenic poisoning, which, if you know anything about that, it basically destroys your intestines and can give you multiple negative impacts. And so after 2 weeks in the journey, I started coughing. I started internalizing the air pollution that was there. And the sunsets were deceivingly beautiful because a halo was created around all the particulates in the air. And yet, in this land where 150,000 people die every year from air pollution, there lay extreme beauty. And this is where I got to appreciate nature and where people live and how you interact with the world. As a learner in the 21st century, I refuse to believe that our historical significance is to destroy this planet and its resources while harming ourselves. If you take a look, there's inspiration everywhere in nature. And as a learner, connecting from that sparrow, I did a few things. I explored nature. And you'll find some amazing things. For example, when you cut a carrot and you take a look at the rings inside the carrot, the ratios are that of a human eye. And guess what? The vitamin A in carrots helps you with color contrast, which is why they always tell you to eat carrots, right? For better vision. In nature, we've been also hearing a lot about beehive colony collapse. But do you know how bees deliver healthcare? When a bee gets ill, 2 other bees will isolate that bee, go out in nature, collect the medication from plants, come back and treat that bee. What a concept. When you take a look at a walnut, you can see how it mimics the human brain, and the omega-3s help the human brain. There are so many things in nature that we missed. And growing up as a kid, one of the things that I want to inspire with the youth is that this is where the scientific discoveries, and this is where you become a stakeholder in the healthcare journey. So one of the stories that I want to tell you is, with all of this information that I'm giving you, how does someone like this get hired into sustainability? It's a really neat story. After college, I went around the country pitching sustainability and these concepts that we miss all the time. And I pitched it to major systems in Chicago and New York, and eventually I ran out of funds. So I came back to Wisconsin. And a local VP told me that I can't hire you, but you can work for free and learn at our health system. So after 9 months of doing that, I had my first report out to the senior leadership. My report out was on energy and how we had saved $21,000 at a clinic, all by doing root cause analysis and finding out that one of the set points was telling the clinic to run 24/7 with 100% occupancy. And so the presentation that I had for the senior leaders at this report out, it was very comedic. It had the Super Bowl ad from Audi, the Green Police, in case you've ever seen that. And right before I went up to the presentation, to give the presentation, the one before me was on cardiac rehab. And you could just hear how tense the room was. It's such a serious topic. And the CEO had raised his hand during the middle of this presentation and said, yes, my mother just went through that. So now here I am coming up with this comedic energy presentation, deciding whether or not I need to tone down my original presentation. But luckily I made the decision to be inspired by nature, to be inspired by my journey, and give the presentation that I did. And the hilarious thing was the CEO was the one laughing the hardest. So that's how I entered into healthcare, with this deep appreciation for nature and connecting all things. One of the things I'd like to leave you with is from a very favorite author of mine by Richard Louv, who says, as a boy, I was unaware that my woods were ecologically connected with any other forest. Nobody in the 1950s talked about acid rain or holes in the ozone layer or global warming. But I knew my woods and I knew my fields. I knew every bend in the creek and dip in the beaten dirt paths. I wandered those woods even in my dreams. A kid today can likely tell you about the Amazon rainforest, but not about the last time he or she explored the woods in solitude or lay in a field listening to the wind and watching the clouds move. Thank you.